Welcome in everyone, this is Sean, recording for MTG 808 Jr. Got a sweet green, white auras standard artisan deck for you guys for Duskmourn standard. A lot of overlap with the blue-white auras deck that we've also featured here on the channel, but I do think that the green cards are very powerful. They do add slightly different benefits. I mean, it's all just trade-offs, but it is a trade-off that I think is very much worth considering, so wanted to share it with you guys today. Before we do that, just want to jump in to our Patreon page. Patreon.com/MTG808Jr. is for those who would like to give back to the project, support the growth of youth magic in Hawaii and potentially other places. Working to get something started here on the mainland. But if you want to support youth magic, help us regrow the JSS to hopefully be a national level thing one day. Would love to get your support. All of our patrons at whatever tier get access to our Discord to have direct communication with us if you so desire. You get to check out our expense report that we put out every year, so you can see how we're committing resources to where, and you get to just know that you're supporting youth magic. Specifically, a huge percentage of our expenses every year are to just go towards funding these scholarship tournaments to give these kids the opportunity to kind of get excited about playing Magic, but also emphasizing the importance of having life success outside of Magic as well. So if that sounds awesome to you, please check out our Patreon, consider becoming a patron. And just want to shout out our current patrons. We got Koji, James, Joe, and Corey. Thank you to all our current and previous patrons from years gone by. We would not be able to do what we do without you. If you want to support the project and you're not able to become a patron, please consider jamming that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. All of those things help us grow the YouTube channel, which if we are able to monetize one day, all of that would also be going straight to supporting the project and trying to share our love of Magic with as many youth and other players as possible. All right, so back to green-white auras. Lots of overlap with the blue-white auras deck. I think all of these white cards that you see here are played in the blue-white auras deck. But the big incentive to be green is Tanglespan Lookout. So it's 2 and a green for a 2/3 satyr. And it says when an aura you control enters, you draw a card. All of the enchantments in our deck are auras. So basically it says when you play a third of, 20, I don't know how many there are, 3, 6, 10, 6, 9... 12, so there's 22 cards in the deck that are going to draw a card if you have a Tanglespan Lookout in play. So this just keeps the juice flowing. It does cost 3, but we do have tons of ways to protect it, give it hexproof in the deck. So like if you play this and you have at least 4 mana, you keep up 1 mana, you're going to draw a card the turn that it comes in, and then you're going to, if you untap with this, you're probably going to draw like 2 or 3 cards a turn at least. So very, very powerful card, keeps the juice flowing. There are also a couple other creatures in the deck that green gives us. Blue gave us the only straight up hexproof creature that is legal in standard Artisan, but green does give us a couple options that have ward. So ward means that if a permanent with ward gets targeted by a spell or ability, that spell or ability gets countered unless the controller pays the ward cost. So in this case, we have 2 creatures that both have ward 2. Tomacool Honor Guard is a 2 mana 3/1 with ward 2, and then Toadstool Admirer is a 1 mana 1/1 with ward 2, and you can pay 3 and a green to put a 1/1 counter on Toadstool Admirer. So if you play either of those cards on curve, the soonest your opponent is going to be able to interact with you is turn 3 if they have a 1 casting cost interaction spell and then they pay the ward 2. So that means that until your opponent has 3 mana, you are free to kind of like load up whatever enchantments you want to put on the creatures before you need to start worry about leaving up mana to protect them. But we do have 6 ways to protect creatures in this deck to give them hexproof until end of turn. One of them is Royal Treatment, 1 mana for 1/1 instant. Target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn, and then you create a Royal Roll token attached to that creature. So the way rolls work is there can only be 1 roll on a creature at any given time. If a new roll gets play it on a creature that already has a roll token, then the old roll token automatically falls off and the new roll token is on. This is the only card in the deck that makes roll tokens. But notably, like if you play a second royal treatment on the same creature, you'll still only have one royal token. Royal roll token. Blah, tongue twister. So a royal roll token is a token aura roll. It says enchant creature gets +1/+1 and has ward 1. So it leaves behind the ward ability to just make it even harder for your opponent to interact. And it does leave behind that +1/+1. It is an aura, so it will trigger the Tangle Span Lookout. The other way that we have to give a creature hexproof in this deck is Shard Mage's Rescue. So it's a white enchantment aura with flash. When it enters, enchant creature you control. As long as Shard Mage's Rescued entered this turn, enchanted creature has hexproof, and then the enchanted creature gets +1/+1. I think Royal Treatment is kind of better in a vacuum than Shard Mage's Rescue because it leaves behind the extra ward 1 on the aura, but because Royal Treatment doesn't stack on the same creature multiple times, I think it's worth having the even 3/3 split between Shard Mage's Rescue and Royal Treatment. So basically, how the ideal line for this deck is to go like first turn Toadstool Admirer. Even if you're on the draw, you can go first turn Toadstool Admirer, turn 2 either Sheltered by Ghosts, you know it's safe, your opponent can't target it, or like Ethereal Armor plus Audacity, right? You play that on 2, and then your opponent, if they do have 3 mana, if they went first, then they would have 3 mana on their turn, but your Toadstool Admirer will have 3 toughness. So even if they have Torch the Tower or Shock, or Disfigure as their 1 mana interaction spell, they can pay the ward, but your Toadstool Admirer is now big enough that you've outsized their 1 casting cost interaction. And then by the time they get to 4 mana with more interaction, by then you have enough mana in play that you should be able to start leaving up extra mana to keep up your hexproof spells, and then just keep your 1 giant creature that's hard for them to interact with bashing them. So that's how the deck would ideally like to play out. But I will just go through the rest of these auras here. I have already covered them in the blue-white auras video, but just for being thorough. Audacity, 1 green for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample, and then 1 Audacity is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. So this makes your creature big on the front end, and it notably gives it trample. Ethereal Armor, 1 white for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and has first strike. So your opponent can't kill it in combat if it's gigantic and it has first strike. Like even death touch creatures won't be able to kill your creatures. Excuse me. And Ethereal Armor does check itself, so it will always give at least +1/+1, and then it grows for each other aura that you have in play. Other auras that we have: Feather of Flight, 1 and a white for a flash aura. When it enters, you draw a card, and then the enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has flying. So you can give it flying. It does draw you a card when it comes into play, and it does allow you to kind of leave up mana for your Royal Treatment or Shard Mage's Rescue. And then if they end up not doing anything, all right, they tap all their mana, they play a creature instead of trying to interact with you, then you can be like, okay, cool, I'll still use my mana anyway, draw a card, give my creature flying, so now the creature you just played to block probably can't. And then Sheltered by Ghosts is like the swingiest card in the deck. It's 1 and a white for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature you control. When it enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Sheltered by Ghosts leaves the battlefield. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has lifelink and ward. So if you give your giant creature lifelink, your opponent can't even race you, because your huge giant creature is just going to gain you so much life that like you're going to win the race. But notably, this card, it's a huge swing. You play it, you give your creature an additional ward 2. So ward does stack, right? So if you play this on a Toadstool Admirer, now your opponent needs to pay 4 extra mana to target it. But you play this, you get their best non-land permanent off of the battlefield, and then you really want to make sure that Sheltered by Ghosts and the creature that it's on don't die. And so you don't really want to play this into open mana unless, you know, you have you're playing it on a creature with ward, or you have like the hexproof spells to be able to protect it, because getting this countered by your opponent killing the creature is a huge tempo negative swing. So just be mindful of that if you do decide to play the deck. We also got Ossification here. It is an aura, so it will trigger the Lookout. It is an enchantment, so it Ethereal Armor will check it. But Ossification, enchant a basic land you control. We're only playing basic lands in this deck. And when Ossification enters, exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until Ossification leaves the battlefield. So, you know, you've got 7 ways to remove your opponent's creatures. You've got 6 ways to protect your creatures. You've got 9 different enchantments that just buff up your creatures and give them special abilities. I guess 13 if you count Sheltered by Ghosts for giving lifelink. And yeah, you're just trying to make one big creature that your opponent can't interact with. Consumed by Greed is notably the best removal spell against you. That is the... I'll just pull it up here. It is... There we go. Consumed by Greed is 1 black for an instant. Target opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures you control. If the gift was promised, meaning they let you draw a card, then they return a creature card from their graveyard to their hand as well. But it's the first part of this card that really wrecks this deck. Target opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures you control. So you spend all these resources making one of your creatures huge. It has hexproof, it has ward, you protect it, but this Consumed by Greed doesn't target the creature, it targets the player. But then it forces you to choose your biggest creature. So that's like probably this deck's worst nightmare, is any deck that's playing multiple copies of those. Notably, our blue-black control deck does play that card, so be mindful. But yeah, outside of that piece of removal, this deck plays really well against removal. I think that the good draws from this deck are going to be very hard for most decks to beat without like dedicated hate against it. I guess I did also forget to mention Optimistic Scavenger. So it's 1 white for a 1/1 human scout, Eerie, whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room. We're not playing any rooms, but you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So it just gives you extra bonus for playing all these cheap auras. Sideboard, Elspeth Smite. You need cheap removal, 1 white for an instant. Elspeth Smite deals 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Gotta have cheap interaction for the red decks. Requisition Raid gives you interaction for artifacts and enchantments. Can also buff up your creatures, which is what this deck likes to do. So it's 1 for a spree. You can pay 1 to add on destroy target artifact. You can pay another 1 to add on destroy target enchantment, and you can pay another 1 for put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls, or you can pay 3 and get all 3 of them, right? That's how Spree works. So we got 2 Requisition Raids. Soul Guide Lantern gives you hate for the graveyard decks. I could see like the green-black up the Beanstalk graveyard deck, or the Reanimator deck potentially giving this problems. So you just want to have interaction for that. Exercise, if your opponent has lots of artifacts and enchantments and big creatures, Exercise is a great sideboard card. And then we got Woodland Acolyte. If your opponent does have Consumed by Greed, you're going to need to play a long grindy game, in which case Woodland Acolyte does that great. It is an adventure card, so you can pay the adventure, 1 green instant, put target permanent card from your graveyard on top of your library, and then once you send it on the adventure, it stays in exile, and then at any point after that, as a sorcerer, you can play the creature for its cost. So 2 and a white for a 2/2, when it enters, you draw a card. So just kind of gives you a little more staying power in the long game. Along with Kutzil, Malamat Exemplar, 1 green-white for a 3/3 legendary cat warrior. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, so that just makes sure that your creatures are safe for you to like play your auras on. They can't be killed in response. And then whenever 1 or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So again, if your opponent is playing Consumed by Greed or one of the other sacrifice effect removals that are out there, and you can't go with your plan A of just like making a giant creature and winning, this allows you to play kind of a little bit of a longer game. Yeah, that's it for this deck. I think it's very straightforward. You're just trying to assemble Voltron, make a big creature, smash your opponent, win. So if that's the kind of Magic you like to play, this is the deck for you. Let us know what you think. Hit that like button, leave a comment, hit subscribe if you want to support us and stay up to date with all the standard Artisan updates that we've got coming for you. Would love to have you be a part of our community. Until next time, peace and chicken grease. Laters.